everybody. So it's with my pleasure today that I'm going to review some miniatures that I've received in the post today from Minden Miniatures. And for those of you that are watchers of the channel, you'll know that I've actually purchased Minden Miniatures in the past and have done a review on their civilians. So today I've got a supplement package. It wasn't really like a pre-made package. Like I ordered a number of miniatures from Jim Perky at Minden Miniatures, and I got it in the post, and I just want to really do a little bit of a review. I was going to do some size comparisons with some of the Conquest minis that I have, just to show that, and just a small discussion on them. One of the things I'd just mention is that it actually came in this sort of box here, which was great. This is similar to before. Good sturdy box with lots of foam, bubble wrap, and packaging. And in some cases where miniatures were a bit more delicate than others, they were actually wrapped in a line in bubble wrap and taped and fixed together. And so packaging was really superb, and I ordered these and they came roughly a week later, which was excellent. I'm going to put a link in the description below for Minden Miniatures, and it's a bit of an interesting operation in the sense that I dealt directly with Jim Perky, who runs the site, and he also has a blog. He also distributes the miniatures from Fife and Drum. Now, my understanding, and I'll let you sort of research this as a viewer on your own because some of the details I may get wrong, but my understanding is Fife and Drum, primarily, at least for the miniatures I'm buying, is it puts out American War of Independence. But Minden Miniatures, that line, is pretty specific to the 7 Years' War. For those of you that watch the channel, you'll know that I'm doing Muskets and Tomahawks, which the French and Indian War, which is what it's often called in North America, is generally referred to beyond North America as the 7 Years' War. Although a disproportionate amount of the conflict did happen in North America and New France, there were conflicts actually in Europe as well, and actually in the Caribbean and other areas as well. So basically, Jim Perky's, who I dealt with, but to purchase the miniatures from Minden Miniatures, my understanding is Mr. Richard Ansell is actually the sculptor for Minden Miniatures, and I believe also for Fife and Drum. And there is definitely a similar look to all of them, and as you'll see, and I'm quite happy with the design. So in order to support my Muskets and Tomahawks game, I've already been itching to collect or acquire some more miniatures to then paint in the future after some projects I have outside of the game immediately. And I ended up purchasing, contrary to my original plan, where I was going to focus on one force after the demo. I ended up just purchasing for both sides, the French and the British. Now, I wanted to get some Grenadiers, and I honestly was looking at ordering from Perry Miniatures because I've never ordered from them before, and they're considered to be top-notch miniatures. But I really enjoyed painting the civilians and that I received from Minden Miniatures, and I'm going to be doing some comparisons later, so I just brought this armed civilian out. I enjoyed painting these so much, and I already have them on the table, that I thought, why not just take a look again at some of the stuff that Minden Miniatures and Fife and Drum offers, because I hadn't fully explored that line yet, and like I said, I really enjoyed dealing with Minden Miniatures already. They were really clean when they arrived, the models, and I just liked them, so that's what I did, and hence we are here today reviewing them. So rather than getting 7 Year War Grenadiers, I actually liked the sculpts from Fife and Drum, not the Minden Miniatures that are also, I order from the same group for the British Grenadiers. And so essentially I got 8 of them, and they came with, looks like, I believe it's 4 different poses for these 8. There is an HQ as well. There's some. These aren't comprehensive. I basically got 4 different miniatures of that style and 8 of them. Here's just one in particular. Marching. I believe one of them has the bag and the other doesn't, and there's just a bit of a difference in the pose and things. I haven't looked closely at these. I kind of looked at them when first purchasing them on the website with what I could with the pictures. Sorry. There's definitely differences in the face between the two. So they're significantly different. Yeah, one has the bag and one doesn't. As you can see, I think these are extremely clean. The casting process just looks really good to me, and it's similar to what I saw before. I did notice on some of them there was a tiny bit of flashing, which in most cases I would consider them superb, the amount of cleanup I would have to do. And you'll see those because I'm going to go through and show most of what I've got here today. But really, like, these are good examples, I would say, of how great the casting process is. So these are, I don't want to digress. I'm gonna digress a little bit from the miniatures as we talk today, but like for the game Musket and Tomahawks, I mean, these would be considered elites, which I don't have, and so they're a category of troop, the Grenadiers, which are elites. So I'm gonna go country to country. The other British that I did get were I got an artillery crew, and so I'll just bring a couple up to show an example. They come with a variety of tools, so more than what you actually need. There's not just 4 for 4 members, but you actually get more, actually. I'll just show another one. This one looks like you might be lighting it or setting it off. Okay. I'm not going to go through every miniature. I'm going to just show you examples from each one. But yeah, those came out really good, and I'll show the artillery pieces last because I wanted to compare and have a little discussion on what I chose for artillery for each force and just kind of what I got and just some of the information on it. I got a British colonel as well. I don't have any officers on horseback. The only people I have on horseback so far are some civilians that on horseback. Now, it comes as a piece where you just have a horse here, and then it comes with the saddle all connected like this, so it's all one piece. One of the things that I like about this range in particular is I refrain from using the word, at least now I do, true scale, because I don't want to offend anyone or sculptors, or because true, what is true, like when you're kind of doing reproduction, right? But I find that they really do shoot for a realistic scale with Minden Miniatures and Fife and Drum. As it's been explained to me, sometimes on a heroic scale, when you see miniatures sitting on a horse, oftentimes the figure is disproportionately bigger in comparison to the horse. And that's often, I think, because of the fact that the figures are in a heroic scale, and the horses are sometimes not made large enough to match. I'm not an expert. I do live in Calgary, Alberta, and there's lots of cattle and horses and things here, out west. But this looks somewhat realistic to me as far as proportion. It doesn't look overly big, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. But I do like that. I've definitely seen examples where miniatures look much too big sitting on a horse. This is kind of new for me too. I haven't really painted any cavalry, so that's going to be a new area for me. But getting to the miniature specifically, and maybe I'll just take him off the horse. The horse itself looks quite nice. I do see a bit of a mold line there to scrape, but oh no, actually, Maybe it's not. Sorry, I went off camera there. I see this here looks like it's meant to be connected to the saddle, and I think probably that is as well. So, but getting to the miniature itself, I think it looks really good. Really nice detail. I love all the detail in here. Not sure if we can capture that well. Yeah, there we go. I'll pull back a bit. The sword going through there. It looks really nice. So, moving on. I'm going to go to the French artillery, it seems. And so, the artillery, you get similar tools for the artillery, but the French are different than the British. You know, they're individual artillery crew for that country. Now these ones I did notice, like that's about the extent of the flash that I noticed, just a little piece there, and that's just should be expected in my mind in most cases. The fact that I haven't even seen that so far just is really impressive to me. Here's another one. Okay. Now, I'm going to move to the officer, the colonel for the French that I'd gotten. If you notice, in a lot of ways I'm kind of matching each side. I didn't get Grenadiers for the French, but I'm sort of matching each side, although like the French have the French Marines, you know, so there are some differences. But looking, this is very similar, obviously, to the British as far as the way he sits on the horse and everything, but it's a completely different sculpt, you know, rather than having his hand kind of on his hip, you know, he's pointing, telling folks what to do. That's his job. And I think it looks very good. So for the French, what I did to supplement their force, I didn't get quite as much, and in some ways I do need to supplement this more, but I have actually more French than British for a number of different reasons. Right now, my French force is a little bit bigger, and so I got a little bit less. But what I didn't really have were regulars that were non-Marines, you know. And so I got. And I'm just going to look up the name here. This is a little bit of a history lesson for me. But they recently put out what is described as Légion des Hainaut Musketeers and Grenadiers. And as I understand the history, these were 7-year war French, but they were actually Continentals. So they remained. These guys remained, and I believe fought with the Austrians against the Prussians, because there was a conflict going on at the same time in Europe on the continent, and the French were helping out there. The British, actually, as I understood it, paid off the Prussians to align with them, and you know, they fight the Austrians. So it's the same time period in the same country, but they were a troop that were actually on the continent, not in New France where I'm using them. From my perspective, because I really like the miniatures, that's very much good enough for me. It satisfies my fairly lax historical need, you know, to be accurate. And they're beautiful. I mean, they're really, really nice. They're very dynamic looking. And so I only got 6 of these, and I got 3 of each. There are ones that are kneeling and firing that I will likely get in the future, and there are HQ, and there are actual French Grenadiers, which I will likely get from this group. I think they really look good, personally. So now, for now, I have just a troop of 6 that I can use of just French regulars that are non-Marines to have in there with officers and things. So lastly, just from the review of the miniatures, is I got 2 cannon. You'll notice that they're disproportionately different in size, and they're not put together. I just put together for the sake of the video. The wagon's wheels are not glued on, and so they're buckling. But if you look here, to my right is a British 6-pounder, and to my left is one of the French 4-pounders. It's not the Swiss 4-pounder, it's another one. It starts with a V. I don't have it committed to memory, but it's on the website. The interesting thing is I actually had a little email discourse with Jim yesterday from the company. He was very gracious to explain to me why I was seeing what I was seeing. I wanted similar size cannon, and essentially I kind of thought I was getting this size for both. I knew there was a difference in weights and measures between the British and the French of that time period, and really it's the bore size and the shot that's being used that determines what a 4-pounder versus a 6-pounder. Because of the difference in the weights and measures, like this was shot a 4-pound, and this actually shot a 6-pound, which is kind of surprising to me. But he'd confirm that that's indeed the case, and I got what I wanted. Now, the reality is, all along, I kind of wanted a smaller looking gun anyway, because I actually felt, from reading history of the time, I knew that in many of the conflicts they were hauling this stuff around, and it just made sense to me that they were really capitalizing on smaller cannon in some of these conflicts. And for the skirmishing that I'm doing in this game, it's a skirmish game, it's not big battlefield. It made sense to me to actually have these, although I didn't mind having something which I viewed as more of like a medium size. So in the future I'll likely get some smaller French cannon as well. I believe that there is some bigger British cannon available, but I'll have to check. But that's an example of the cannon that I'll be using for the artillery crews. Just for size comparison here, I'm just going to bring some of the French the minis over, but this is what we're looking at. And then for the British, I think it's good. It looks like they'll fit alongside it quite nicely. So yeah, I guess next what I wanted to just show, because I'd not shown non-civilian Minden or any Fife and Drum miniatures yet in comparison to my other miniatures. I just wanted to show some of what I've painted already, and just these guys next to it on similar bases. So I have here a Delaware Indian, a British regular, a French officer, and a civilian from Minden Miniatures 7-Year War. Now, I actually think they all look pretty good. Now, these 3 are Conquest range, and then this one is the Minden. Now, it looks to me, and I'm going to lower, pardon me, but I'm going to lower my tripod, I think it might be better. It looks to me as if the heights really work out well. he's standing on a pedestal a little bit more like the others, so it does raise him slightly. In some ways I think it makes him a bit more in line. He does look a little taller in general, and he is standing on a rock on the front on the piece, so it raises him slightly above this one. But if I actually maybe put him here, he's a little bit taller than the guy here, but he is also raised on that pedestal. But I think it's not significant in my mind, really, even though he is a bit more slight too of build, because I do find the Conquest minis to be a bit more of heroic scale. You can see that even the broadness is a little less. Now, I always think of the Grenadiers as being taller. They anyway, with their hats and just everything. I did notice a little bit of variation in the Fife and Drum. There was one guy shooting that's just a little bit taller than some of the others. It's kind of nice though, but it's sort of like almost like a natural difference. So you can see he's definitely slighter than the French officer from Conquest, the new Fife and Drum Grenadier. But next to the civilian, I think he looks pretty good as far as size. I would have thought maybe a little bit bigger, but then again, the guy that's next to him, he was one of the more smaller ones. The guy next to him, it's about the same. This was the one that actually I noticed was bigger. This guy firing. He looks to be a bit closer to this guy in size. In general, I do think that they fit. Now that's Fife and Drum, it's not the Minden line. If I actually use one of the Minden, let's say French that I just showed, sorry, just positioning here. I think it works quite well. Definitely a bit slighter, as I mentioned. But if I use, let's say, him as a comparison again. I think it's quite good. These are things where, looking up close, they really you can see differences considerably, but at times, and to a degree, I think there's we can always chalk up a certain amount of differences just differences between people. But I think on the table, these guys will all, and I'm kind of pulled back as much as I can here without moving my tripod, but even here, I think they all look suitable together. These are only two to, depending on how you want to define it, 3 makes, because you could consider the Fife and Drum and Minden different. I think they are the same sculptor, but they are different lines. So yeah, so I actually think they work quite well, and I'm quite happy with this company and this purchase, and I hope it's helpful if you're considering buying these miniatures, and I will put the link below for Jim Perky's site, Minden Miniatures and Fife and Drum. And that site is, I think, primarily for North America. I think there may be other sites that are geared towards Europe, but I could be wrong. You'd have to look into that. Okay, take care everybody.